Ukrainian troops in Bakhmut are exposing the truth about Wagner forces. Are they more capable than they let on? And just what is Ukraine's overall strategy with the city? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. We're going to be taking a look at leaked interviews coming to us from The Sun via Reuters, right? Because The Sun just loves reposting Reuters stuff. But before we get too far into it, I wanted to quick tell you, if you like what I do, YouTube is always demonetizing my videos. Just dropped monetization from another one yesterday. So I launched combatvetnews.com. This is the website with all the news stories that I can't get to in the daily update, including the Sudanese civil war, NATO, Russia, Ukraine. It has all my YouTube videos. And if you want to support the channel, it works just like Patreon. And it gets you access, any tier, to the exclusive content, including the combat footage that I can't review here on YouTube. On Friday, we took a look at the craziest video I've ever seen. This is from the Da Vinci Wolves. It is GoPro footage from outside of Bakhmut, and it is... If this were a U.S. soldier, I would put them in for a silver star. They repel a Russian assault on their trenches, rallying a squad, and sometimes single-handedly repelling a fire team moving on their trenches. It's wild stuff. And if you want to support me and get access to those videos, check out combatvetnews.com. Okay, let's take a look at this footage here from Bakhmut. Now, one of the things that's been talked about a lot in a lot of commentators is the spring mud. But as you guys can see, it's not really impeding even this pickup truck. Admittedly, it's driving on roads, but we can see this isn't a World War I level of mud that's just stopped operations in their tracks. It's pretty standard spring mud type environments. So, you know, I don't really buy the they can't launch a spring offensive because there's mud excuse. It's just not there. But you guys can see right there in terms of real remaining value, Bakhmut doesn't really have it. It's abandoned. These buildings are completely uninhabitable. Not only is the structure itself fundamentally damaged in almost every case, rendering them uninhabitable, most of the surrounding terrain has been destroyed. Whatever industries Bakhmut supported, they're not coming back. As you guys can see here, again, look at the mud. It's significant, but it's not operation stopping. It's not show stopping levels of mud. Here you can see a U.S. made Humvee. I think this is an M113 or an M1117, something like that. But it's up armored. It's not the top tier of armor that you sometimes saw towards the second half of like the Iraq War, like 06, 07. But what it is the it can take, other than a direct hit from a 155, it can basically protect the crew from a 155 shell that lands anywhere near it. Which is huge in this conflict for especially moving troops and equipment from behind the lines. Plus, this turret can provide a level of support by fire to light infantry. It's a great vehicle. I mean, it's combat tested for a reason, and in the up armored configuration, it can be really effective. Okay, so you can see these are some of the Ukrainian troops defending Bakhmut, which are likely TDF forces. These are territorial defense forces. So not necessarily the professional soldiery of the Ukrainian army.
Який нас штурмує, він тут нормально підготовлений. Можливо, навіть там не так, як розказують, що штурмують там зеки, які тут стоять, і все решта, підрозділ, який знає, що він робить.
Okay, this is what is interesting to me, because what he's talking about is actually the Wagner Group's use of what are called assault companies, assault detachments. And assault detachments are what the U.S. we'd call like task forces, purpose organized units around an objective of taking, in this case, Ukrainian strong points, bunkers, buildings, trench lines, that sort of thing. And what they do is they do have low skill light infantry, but this low skill light infantry is only a subset of what they bring to the fight. Let's see if we can find the Russian assault detachment task org. Let's see if we find an image for it here. Here we go. This is it looks like a decent rundown of this assault detachment. So you can see this is from a Russian open source analyst, basically. So it has these assault companies. These 3 assault companies are going to be low skill light infantry, but then they have more skilled fire support group. This would be like mortars, possibly thermobaric rockets. The thermobaric rockets are actually in the flamethrower group, but there's a recon group, a reserve group, probably also light infantry. But there's tanks, air defense components, engineering or sappers, ground equipment recovery. So what we would call a wrecker, or think of it as like a tow truck for armored vehicles, electronic warfare, thermobaric rockets, UAV, and a dedicated medevac group. So what you have is a lot of specialty troops supporting these light infantry units. So instead of we heard a lot about the idea that Russia was conducting these unsupported frontal assaults with light infantry and that they were easily repelled. Russia has gotten smarter. They're supporting these simple frontal assault infantry efforts with fire support, better reconnaissance, tank, air defense, proper obstacle clearing. And these are all specialty troops that are used sparingly, right? Taking casualties, having one of your sappers become a casualty is way worse than having, again, an easily replaceable, lightly trained light infantryman. So the result for Ukrainian forces when they go up against these assault detachments, and Wagner's are structured almost the same as the Russian militaries. In fact, Wagner seems to have been the ones to originate them. Given that that task org looks like Wagner Group, right? Where you have a professional PMC element and you have a low skill light infantry element in the form of convicts. And so what Ukrainians will often see is that their fortified, strong positions take a lot of suppressive fire, a lot of indirect fire from these specialty troops. And by the time the light infantry assault occurs, they are suppressed. Their ability to fight is degraded. It's a strategy that works, and it's one of the reasons why, as we work back in time, you can see Russian forces making steady block by block gains. They're not going to break Ukrainian lines, but they are being effective in their fire support and then ability to take territory block by block. The issue is that it's not scalable. Right? These light infantry, they can take a city block, but you can't take miles of trench line. You can't cover open terrain with light infantry. So this detachment concept won't work outside of Bakhmut and a few other urban strong points or like key intersections, like Ivansky or something. So, and the other thing that happens when you have an effective tactic is that your soldiers survive. These light infantry units, they're not that good when they start, but if they can survive for a month, 2 months, 3 months, they'll become better fighters. They'll have the opportunity to learn through experience instead of simply becoming low skill casualties, high casualty rates. Then another fresh batch of conscripts is brought in, and they too never get the opportunities to actually develop combat and survival skills.
Противника не потрібно недооцінювати.
Не сидіть в одному окопі, розсредоточтесь ліва і права сторона, і там у вас є 2 радійки. Права сторона радійка і ліва, і прийняв прийом.
Бояться вони, тому що зараз більшість зброї, яка в нас є, зараз люди вже навчені, особливо там АГС, міномети. Люди настрілялися, вони можуть активно працювати і прицільно.
Yeah, this is what he's talking about. These TDF forces, again, they also are fairly green as soldiers. The difference is they seem to be taking casualty rates about half the rate of Russians, according to some estimates. And when you're on the defensive, it's naturally inclines itself to taking less casualties, right? Because the enemy has to break cover and advance. You do not. And so especially their growing ability, as he said, to use indirect fire assets like grenade launchers and mortars in the defensive, using what we call pre-planned targets, can really make a difference. If you are a light infantry force conducting an assault, like we talked about, there's only a limited number of routes you can do to get to a building. And if the defenders have time to identify those routes, and they will pre-plan fires. They will tell mortar teams, hey, here's 3 intersections where we think they're going to cross to approach, for example. And when they observe the enemy crossing that intersection, they don't need to do the math. They don't need to have the mortar team figure it out. They just say, hey, we call them TRPs in the U.S. military. Say, hey, TRP Alpha. Fire for effect, right? Infantry in the open, whatever. And then the mortars already know. They have it pre-sighted. They drop mortars quickly and immediately. And once you get good at doing that, it can make light infantry advances very difficult, because even if you are suppressed in your defensive position, your mortars may not be.
Коли працює міномет, вони в більшості не рухаються. Коли вони чують квадрокоптер, особливо вночі.
Right. When they take mortar fires, again, they usually don't move. He's describing them being suppressed. They're suppressed by mortar fire. But it's only good if it's accurate, right? So it's got to be accurate mortar fire to really get them down.
До мінімуму. Так само і з по 300. Вони своїх забирають, коли ти...
And they only pick up their wounded when it's calm, because, again, the medevac group is a specialty group, and they're not going to risk them.
Тихо, спокійно. Десь якщо в небі квадрокоптер є, вони його не будуть виносити. Бахмут можна буде відновити, тільки скільки треба сюди сил задіяти, щоб вибити противника звідси.
Right. Even this guy knows the calculus that Ukrainian headquarters commanders have to make, right? Bakhmut is incredibly intensive. As we've seen, the full weight of the Russian military is basically leaning into Bakhmut, clearing it block by block. And it's taken them months. I mean, we have been talking about this for probably 4 months now, the Battle of Bakhmut. And Russia is winning, but what is it winning is the question. What will this change when they take Bakhmut?
Тиждень, і це все буде добре. Це буде займати місяць, щоб кожну хату перевірити.
This is why the danger in the Battle of Bakhmut months ago was, and Russia correctly identified when they couldn't take the city itself, they tried to encircle it and cut off these 2 main roads out of Bakhmut. And they almost succeeded, right? They almost succeeded. Ukrainian forces were able to bring in some top tier guys, their Foreign Legion, these Da Vinci Wolves, and stabilized these roadways going in and out. And because they were able to do that, it forced Russia to go back to the high casualty, highly attritional strategy of going block by block through Bakhmut. But when Ukraine goes on the offensive, they have to know that prolonged urban fighting can't be the strategy. Instead, what they should focus on is encirclement. Keeping the mechanized warfare does its best in big open pieces of terrain. And so you could see how easily that certain places have territory that favors that more than others. Again, a lot of analysts on both pro-Russian and pro-Ukrainian have identified Melitopol to Mariupol as terrain that's very favorable to the maneuver warfare that Ukraine wants to conduct. But let's say, again, they have their tanks. It's going to take too long in a big offensive to clear every house, every building in this, like, Buhas, for example, right? Instead, what they'll probably do, they should do is fight as close as they reasonably can, then cut off the routes to and from, and then the offensive moves on, and a small contingent remains here, basically isolating the Russian contingent that remains trapped here. Now, you can't do it if there's too many Russians, right? You can't leave like a brigade in your rear. But if you're talking about a company plus, right? You cut them off from food, water, support. They're not going to last but a couple of days before they will either be run out of ammunition, food, or water, and surrender, or stage like a desperate attack that'll make it fairly easy to eliminate the remaining resistance. And that's the idea, is to create this encirclement. And again, Russia wants to do the same thing. They're trying to do it now in Avdiivka. You can see they're not pushing into the urban area itself. They're trying to go around it and cut off escape routes. That's just sort of how this conflict is playing out. See these guys doing probably a security patrol, right? Staying under the tree cover, smart, just watching out, making sure that they're behind the lines, but it's still possible. Lines change all the time, and the fog of war. They just probably want to make sure that this looks like a headquarters.
От є будівлі, в яких ніхто не проживає, там немає наших військових. Вони туди просто працюють, просто спалюють будівлі, вони завалюються.
Yeah, this scorched earth, right? You can see it is a strategy. It denies them cover. It denies Ukrainians use of this building if they destroy it, but it also denies the Russians use of that building. It looks cold out. Yeah, I'm fascinated with the idea that there's still civilians here, honestly. It seems preposterous to me. They say they have nowhere else to go. He seems skeptical of this, and I've heard from other sources that they believe that a lot of the civilians staying in areas that are contested are pro-Russian and are hoping that the Russians come to liberate them. But at this point, I would assume that you'd want to just get out. No one wants to be at war. Not as a civilian. I mean, not as a combatant. Anyway, this was actually shot, I think, April 22nd. So it's pretty recent. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me. As always, thanks to our Colonel tier members of the website of combatvetnews.com. Thanks so much for your support. Thanks to all our Lieutenant tier members for your support. You guys are the ones who make this possible, and I hope to see you over there. I'll catch you in the next one.